Well, welcome to our Wednesday Espresso Zoom from Casa, Italia. Um, we're in the future going to have sponsorship also from the Loyola Italian American Studies program. And Carla, unfortunately, is not able to be with us today. But we do have CJ Martello. CJ took over a tradition at Franoi of Petals from Roseland that was originated uh, by, names are escaping me these days, but
Mario Avignoni.
Mario Avignoni, a longtime Roselandite, and I don't know, he carried on at the Petals from Roseland for 30, 40 years, it seems. And it seems like only yesterday to us oldsters like me, but what has it been 10, 15 years that you've been doing it, CJ?
Been a dozen.
A dozen. The Rosalind Neighborhood is a classic. These days, you hear about it in the news and with gang violence and drugs and things like that. But in its day, from around 1900 to the 1960s, it was one of the major Italian American communities. And I always look to it as being a group that was oriented toward organizing, and it had many clubs, and it had a lot of second generation people who were on their way to Americanizing, and the Church of St. Anthony there was one of the institutions that they organized around. And there was a lot of good music going on, the Roseland Operetta Club, and so on and so forth. So let's welcome CJ, who has collected his best articles, best columns into a book, and is working on yet another book. So CJ.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, Lois, how you doing? Ursino, Barbara, Gerald. So, like Dominic said, I took over the column from Mario Avignoni, and he was writing newsletters to about the servicemen in World War II when Father Armando Pierini, who was the spiritual director at Sacred Heart Seminary for the seminarians, but more importantly, the director and founder of Villa Scalabrini for the older Italians. Anyway, Father Pierini asked Mario if he would write a column for the Franoi newspaper at the time. And that's how the column came about. So with me, what happened was Mario, when he was 90 years old or so, they decided to have someone else write the columns because for 5 years, they were reprinting older columns that he had written. So I submitted some examples, and I was selected to go ahead and write the column. And as a result of being selected to write the column, I went full bore into the program. So I ended up writing the book, Petals from Roseland, as Dominic had mentioned. It's a compilation of the best of 10 years of my columns. And it's quite successful. I've sold over 600 copies. And I'm working towards putting together a second book on people's stories about life in Roseland. And I requested stories from people, but I only had I had over 100 responses saying what a great idea, but only about 5 ideas or stories were submitted. But using Facebook, every time a topic about Roseland appears on Facebook, there's anywhere from 50 to over 100 comments. So I'm going to take the topic, subject, expand on the topic, and then use those comments from Facebook as comments on the story for my second book. So the basic premise of Petals from Roseland is maintaining our Italian American heritage. And as you're all well aware of, there is really not Little Italy in Chicago anymore. my son is a Navy officer, and I visited him in San Diego. I visited him in San Francisco and in Rhode Island. And every one of those has a little Italy. But you come back to Chicago and there's hardly anything left of what we call Little Italy. So part of the effort of my column is to maintain our Italian American heritage. And people have moved on from the family settings that we're all used to. Neighborhoods have dispersed. And like it didn't help the fact that when they built the Kennedy Expressway, and Daley said, wait a minute, because it was going to go straight. You know that curve downtown? The expressway was going to go straight through the Irish neighborhood. And Daley said, no thanks, curve it, go through the Italian neighborhood. So one way or the other, Italian neighborhoods have been dispersed. And Roseland's got a great mix of Southern and Northern Italians. Everyone was open. St. Anthony's is actually, could have been named St. Alexander's because the Southern Italians wanted named after their saint, but there were more Northern Italians. So it became St. Anthony's. And Roseland changed, as Dominic had mentioned, in the 60s and 70s. And that like halted immediately the Italians in the neighborhood. They used to gather together and the stories of the Italians and the stories they carried on in each family. So my book, my column, has helped to promote the idea of the Italian-American family. And the memories of Roseland are very much appreciated. My column for February is all nostalgia because usually I would intersperse it with events like the St. Anthony's dinner dance, Venetian al Mundo dances and events. But since they're no longer holding events, now it's truly a nostalgia piece where I write about everything that happened in the past. So I write about Roseland and the shopping area and where people used to go and the different, parishes they belong to in an effort to maintain the memories Roselandites had. And my column is available through print media, through the social media, and then I mail copies out, and I also hand out hard copies to people I see. So I'm doing my best to keep the word out there. And when I joined Franoy as a correspondent, I lived on the north side of the city. I got married in 1972, lived on the north side immediately since then. And when I joined, I should say when I became a Franoy correspondent, I joined the Venetian al Mundo, the Order Sons and Daughters of Italy in America. I joined Unico. I went to Italian festivals all around the city. And I also joined a group called Spaghettios, which is a group of former Roselandites that would get together once a month. So I joined all these groups while I still lived on the north side. So when I got closer to retirement, I actually bought a home in Pullman. That was 8 years ago. And the thing is that many people thought I already lived in Pullman because I wrote about it often. I was here for different events all the time. So it made sense that I moved back to Pullman and bought my own home out here. And that's how I came about living in Pullman and getting back to my roots. It seems the older I got, the closer I got to my roots because I ended up going to St. Anthony's where we all in Roseland grew up. That was our Italian parish. And now St. Anthony's is the last remaining parish in Roseland. St. Anthony's actually is a territorial parish now and embodies the 8 or 9 different parishes in Roseland that were in Roseland. So in an effort to promote memories of Roseland and so many Italians in Roseland, 2 friends and I, Paul Petratus and Dan Bavino, got together and we created the Roseland Roundtable. And we encourage people say, oh, I don't have any photos to put up there. Well, we encourage them to send photos of their family's events. And not only the family events, but the background of the events. So if there was a procession at St. Anthony's, a picture of procession was great. Didn't matter if their family members were in it or not. So we ended up with so many photos that Facebook actually shut down the site for a minute because they wanted Danny Pavino, who ran the site, to either take on advertising or to make it a private site. instead of an open site. So that's what he did. He made a Dan Bavino Roseland Roundtable. But it has thousands and thousands of photos, like 3,500 photos at least. So, and then that's how I came about writing my first book. After 10 years, I finally got to the point where I could combine them into a good book. And as recently as the last week, I sold another 5 copies to different people all over the country, and actually in Italy also. So I sold over 650 copies, and it's gotten a lot of favorable comments. My writing has received the Leonardo da Vinci Award for Excellence in Writing from the Order Sons and Daughters of Italy in America. And it encouraged me to go ahead and write the second book that I'm going to be working on. So, insofar as being a writer, my writing background is that I created a writing background. I lived on the north side, and there was no writers group that I could find to join. And so I put posters around, and I advertised in the Chicago Reader, and I created my own writing group. And for 3 years, I had my own writing group with a steady group of 7 to 10 people for 3 years, which is quite an accomplishment. But I also joined other writing groups. I was a member of the Neighborhood Writing Alliance, which is socially sponsored group. And through them, we published a book every month. So I have my writings published every month for about 8 years. And then I also belong to a writers group at Barnes and Nobles and public libraries. I would join a couple writers groups. So that's where I got my writing from, my writing skills from. And I also, any group I volunteered for, I was great on volunteering. So any group I volunteered for, I always wrote for the newsletter or created a newsletter and wrote that newsletter, like my American Legion post, and other groups I belonged to. I had my own, my own writers group, which I call RAS, W-R-A-S, Write, Rewrite, and Submit. I made it a point to create a newsletter for them every week. And as I said, I distribute my column monthly through email, through the mail. And for topics are really fairly easy to come by. And it depends on what I want to write about and how I want to write about it. If I want to write about a general topic, I can, because like they have Pullman picnics. So I write about that and intertwine college, high school classmates and different parishes, So also get ideas for topics from conversations. Other people would suggest to me that I write about, such as Roseland Little League, Roseland Operetta Club, as Dominic had mentioned. And I get my information from former Roselandites, people who used to live in Roseland. And I go ahead and contact them and interview them. Some of my greatest sources of information have been from people in their 90s. And I've learned that if they say, "Oh, do you want to talk to me about this? I'll tell you some stories." I'm like, "Yes." And I'm there the next day. And when you get to a certain age, it's like, who knows when you're going to go? So I always make it a point. Like, there was one lady who was 108 years old. I interviewed her. And 3 weeks later, she passed away. So I made a point, actually, boom, got there within 2 days being offered to interview her. And her daughter, her niece, was actually head of the Women Piemontese Society in Chicago.
Yeah.
So
where did the Italians come from who lived in Roseland?
The Italians in Roseland came from the north and the south, but primarily the north, at St. Anthony's anyway. And the Piemontese from the Piedmont area. We have people from Tressaconca, Aroana, Gorizia, Asiago, Milano. So people from all of the northern parts that I know of. But we also had people from the southern section of Italy.
Yeah. Where were the Sicilians from?
Down to Sicily.
Okay. I can't remember either.
There was one person that just I was talking to him, and he's, "Oh no, we're not from Italy." I'm like, "Oh, you're not?" "No, we're from Sicily." I'm like, "Oh, okay." What can I say? Okay. I let it slide. you know. Anyway, so yeah, so that's and other places I used to get my topics from or get my topics from calendars because the events that are coming up on calendars, and then somebody will mention something on literature or something, and then other people suggest different things. So, like my column for April, which I'll be writing this week, is going to be about local grocery stores, local mom and pop stores. Because in Pullman, well, like so when Italy opened downtown, I was there that Sunday, and I bought 3 different types of salami, and I ate almost all of it on the way home because it was so different because it was fresh. Whereas if you go to Jewel, you don't know how long that's been sitting there, right? Well, in the old days, there was mom and pop store on the corner, and you got everything fresh all the time. But every block had a store, or every other block, every few blocks, or they'd have a tavern. Pullman and Roseland was known at one time for having the most churches and another time for having the most taverns. So it's an interesting point. And so my plan for April is to write about a couple of local grocery stores here that were in Roseland. A lot of people grew up in them, going to them all the time because you went every day because you didn't have refrigerating systems and freezers like we do now. So anybody got any questions so far?
Yeah, Jeanette, you want to jump in? You're a fellow Roselandite. Jeanette?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry I was late. I had a crash this morning on my computer.
Oh,
But anyway, yeah, CJ and I have talked over time. We both went to St. Anthony's, and we've had a lot of the same experiences. I moved out as soon as I could because Roseland was kind of closed up in those days when I was going to college. So
Yeah.
I moved to the north side like but they moved, most of the family moved farther south to Dalton and Chicago Heights and even Crete and farther down and what else, Homewood. And so I was the only one who moved up north, but it was a good experience. But, my uncle had a grocery store, 111 West 115th Street by Satriano's gas station. An angle from the Schlitz Brewery over there. And so, we used to walk over there all the time. And he had a lunch counter at one time. And then he had to move to Dalton. That's what up at the end of his life. But he had made his own Italian sausage and roast beef and spaghetti sauce. And it was always a pleasure to go to Uncle Mario's because the whole place smelled good.
yeah, we in Chicago Heights inherited the Panozzo Funeral Home, and
Oh yeah.
a good number of Roselandites in the 60s,
Oh, yeah.
70s, and 80s.
Well, I mentioned in one of my columns a story that funeral directors always ask when they get together, how does Panazzo brothers always get these people from all the suburbs to come and use the Panazzo brothers services when they die instead of using the services where they actually live? And that's because of the fact that, hey, Panazzo brothers was Roseland. That was it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big part of it. We have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question for CJ. CJ, you mentioned that you've written about the Roseland Little League. I'm wondering if you have any information about the Roseland Mustangs, which was a semi-pro football team after World War II.
I actually knew a guy that played that, and he gave me a game book from the game that the Roseland, his team from the north side came over here. His name Chico de Benedetto.
Hey, Chico Benedetto is my uncle.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Chico de Benedetto?
We played against the Roseland Mustangs.
Yeah.
I've got a similar book from him.
Oh, funny. Yeah, my good buddy. And he
you had visited him in the elderly home when I was there one time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, because he's my good buddy. He gave me that book, and I'm like, oh, Chico, thanks. And it's like all this information. The booklet is 10 cents or something like that. But interesting. Yeah, that was they. You know, it was a big deal because South Side was full of good sportsmen. You know.
Yeah, Gerald, tell us a little bit about the impact of sports on the Americanization process and the impact it had on the generations of Italian immigrants.
Yeah, well, I can use my uncle as an example. Uh, his father was an illiterate Sicilian shepherd who stowed away on a ship to get to America and actually met his wife on the ship. But he had, no interest in sport. He thought that was, as many were working class Italians, no matter how many kids they had in the family, they wanted to put them to work as soon as possible and thought that, that was a better use of their time. But my uncle was the second generation. He grew up in a, schoolyard playground where they were taught not only in physical education classes, but in the playground to play American sports. And he ended up becoming president of what was called the Wizard Arrows Social Athletic Club on the North Side, and there's all kinds of, political sponsorships, both parties. So he got to meet all kinds of people. He knew people from judges all over the city. He would travel every Sunday. It seemed like he was going all over the city suburbs just to pick up Italian products to bring to somebody or another. He was always bringing, food to Catholic churches and rectories and convents, helping people, who he actually started his own company after. And I think he got a lot of his business acumen through being president of this, social athletic club in his youth. But they actually, I don't want to take too much of CJ's time here, but he died 3 years ago. But before that happened, they named a street after him in Chicago on the North Side in his neighborhood.
Yeah, he was big in our American Legion post.
Yeah,
and he was friends with Gary Fensick, who lived in the neighborhood on the North Side. Chico was friends with everybody.
Yes, I know.
One funny story about Chico is that you always recognize Chico's van because it was the one that was all dented up from his little fender benders.
Well, you might. There's a story behind that, which I don't know if you know. He had lost an eye in, I think, 1956 by trying to push out a neighbor's car during the winter in a snowstorm, and a chunk of ice came up, hit him in the eye, and he lost his eye. There's a whole bunch of stories about what he would do with that eye to amuse his fellow workers. But that's the story behind that.
Oh, okay. CJ, you had some thoughts about publishing, and
Anybody
I
have
know
a
you
question?
went with a professional publishing and printing company.
Well, my thing has always been, like I said, my writing group was write, rewrite, and submit. And, through the years, I met a lot of people who have published and self-publishing. And the thing is that everybody who self-publishes recreates the wheel. And I saw no need for that because they also created mistakes when they were busy recreating the wheel. So I was fortunate to have a friend, Sharon Woodhouse, who owned Lakeside Publishing for a number of years. I've known her Sharon for 25 years, but she had moved to Milwaukee and had gotten out of the publishing business herself. But she opened, fortunately for me, she's an advisor for publishing. So I used her services, paid her a commission. I used her services, and she had everything under control. And so my beautiful book has a very silkscreen cover, which people comment on all the time. It's very beautiful cover, but I would have known nothing about that. And then when it comes to printing, she had contacts in the printing arena, so she knew who was a good printer and who wasn't. So she got the best deal, and she also sold my book online. So when I stopped selling it through Amazon, she still sold it, and now I just stopped her selling it on Amazon. So she put selling it through her website. So now she put people can contact me for copies of my book, because I'm down to 50 copies or so of my book, and I'd like to keep it that way until I get to the point where I might have to order more, because it's cheaper to order more. So last time I ordered 200 books and it cost me $500, but I don't want to get stuck with a trunk load of books.
Yeah, that was always the problem for self-publishing.
You know, if you're
You have a
familiar with
copy of the book. Wave the cover in front of us. We have a tradition of that. Petals from Roseland.
So this is it, Petals from Roseland. I selected the cover and she elected the materials for the cover. It feels like silk. And the picture on the front is, got the okay to use it, was taken by an eye doctor, Gino Cello, who had photos. One thing that we learned was that there were not that many photos taken back in the 50s, early 60s, because it cost you $6 or $5.95 for a roll, and it cost you $9.95 to develop it. So a lot of people just didn't, it wasn't a luxury everybody could afford to take pictures. There's only one family I had met through all the years who their mother was a photo fanatic. And she took all the pictures, but her daughters decided to keep them. But anyway, so that's how I got to use that picture on the front of the cover of 111th and Michigan Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put in 24 pictures inside the book. Oh, another thing, if you're thinking of publishing, what I did is I put photo pages in there, because someone had mentioned that when they did their book, they added the photos into the copy. And every time they added a photo, it rearranged the entire copy layout and the breaking of the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So it was much easier to put in 3 pages or 8 pages with 3 photos apiece. So that was one of the things with my book. And like I said, it was much easier to have my friend who had all this publishing experience to go ahead and do it. You know, because I've been in writers groups and seminars about printing your own book, and people are lost because they're frightened of, like, what do they have to go through? It's going to cost them $10,000, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Then, of course, we've got the Casa Italia program, the libraries program of helping people publish on Amazon.
and the good thing about that is that it's print on demand. So I had to order 500 books. Print on demand, you don't have to. And you can buy 10 at $5 a piece, right? To give to your family.
Yeah, and there's no upfront cost. There's a lot of time that you've got to put into it. But if you've got a nice, clean Word manuscript, it can be turned into it. I don't know if we get our tech to talk about that. Jason, you want to make some comments about the process?
Well, we have from our seminar a few months back on the Saving Our Stories, we have a full review of different perspectives on that, different advice and techniques that can be found at the website. Otherwise, CJ has a good point as far as starting with the text. It can be manipulated in any page size, and then the photos would come in afterwards.
Yeah, we've been inserting the photographs in the text, and it does provide some complications, but the software is really pretty forgiving in those terms. You just have to juggle it around. So for any of you out there who might be interested in publishing a book, perhaps a personal history, a family history, and don't feel it's appropriate to go through the professional or academic publishers, we can help you to publish your book. We've done about a dozen of them over time, and I can't say that any of them will be nominated for a Nobel Prize or
No,
anything
sir.
like that, but
Never know.
they do save our stories. So we're trying to do that. And if you've got maybe a part of the work that you do that would be appropriate for this kind of publication,
And that's one of the
we
things.
encourage you to approach
That's
us.
why I went to I resourced my friend Sharon, because she has the experience, and why should I have to learn how to do it all? It's the same thing Casa Italia offers with her publishing program. You don't have to sit there and ponder about how do I go about getting it into Amazon and getting formatted for Amazon, because Casa Italia has the facility and the experience to help you accomplish that. And that's where I'd like to do one of my books, at least through Casa Italia, to offer it to people if they'd like to get it, because it's such a great thing. And why reinvent the wheel is my whole purpose, you know?
Yeah, well, Jason is very experienced, and God bless Jason. We wouldn't be anywhere in this
Yeah.
publication business without Jason, his
Yeah.
contribution.
Now I say the thing about writing a book is you got to write. You know, just as Catholics are called practicing Catholics, because there isn't a perfect Catholic. You need to be a practicing writer and get used to the fact that no one will ever be a perfect writer.
Yeah, that's right.
In college, I had a English teacher, and she was one of these fretful people. And she's like, "Oh, I've been writing this magazine article for 6 months, but I'm just never satisfied with it." Well, that doesn't make sense, because it stops you from writing and gaining more experience as a writer. When I had a writers group, one of my writers, this guy, said to me, "Oh, I'd rather spend 10 years writing a good book than write a whole bunch of books that aren't that good." And I said, here's the problem with that. What if your book, after 10 years, is only good in your eyes and not anybody else's? You spent 10 years on something that doesn't bear fruit. Better, you should go out and water the tree every day and get fruit from it seasonally than waiting 10 years to see what you get.
Yeah.
You know, that's my advice on writing. Keep writing. And people say, "Oh, you're so prolific." When I had my writers group, I actually had a writers group. It was very interesting. I lived in the north side in what's Boys Town. What's it called? Lakeview. Lakeview. All these young college graduates were there. There was no writers group available. So I began one. When I first had my first session at the public library, where I couldn't charge because otherwise they wouldn't allow it. So I got the room for free, but I couldn't charge. So it was great because I got the experience of writing. However, I had 37 people show up. That's
Wow.
how bad they wanted to write. So originally I had a writers group every Saturday, different group every other Saturday. And then I narrowed it down, through attrition, to where I had one group every other week. And that group ended up with 7 to 10 regular people for 3 years. But the whole thing is people want to write, and they had nowhere to go to learn how to work, to get the experience of writing. And that's
Well-
what's important. That's why it's better to be prolific and put things out there and get better with time than to sit there and write one piece every 6 months because you're never sure if it's going to be, if it's good.
But what's so special about you, CJ, is that you got out there and sold the book. And hearing that you sold 600 copies of it is sounds like a miracle to me.
Yeah,
How did you do it?
well, you know what? It is a lot. And people, like I said, I just sold 5 more books, or 3 more books last week, I should say. I got an order for 2 more last night. But it's because of the topic, and because people love it. They love the idea of Rosalind and remembering Rosalind. And the thing is, the group from the 60s who had to move out of Rosalind actually is the last group that remembers that Rosalind. So it's a treasured memory for them. So that's why my book did so well. And one woman actually called me up and said, every time I pick up your book and read your book, I cry because it means that much to me. And I'm like, that's fantastic. And I've heard all kinds of stories of, I had a guy call me yesterday, kept me on the phone for 45 minutes. Oh, if I got stories for you, I got so many stories about Roseland. Funny thing is, he grew up in Roseland until the 8th grade. And then his family moved out to Lemont, Illinois. But he keeps in touch with all his friends from when he grew up in grade school here. So Roseland was just an amazing place, I guess, is the way to put it. And that's why I was able to sell 600 books. But I knew I'd be able to sell the book because so many people were always giving me stories and wanted to talk about it. But it's very funny. But nowadays, I have people who are like 85 years old and say, "Oh, I got a story for you, but you can't tell anybody." I'm like, "What's the difference? Most of the people you grew up with aren't around." So
Maria Rosaria had a question.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
Maria.
CJ. Thank you so much for your presentation. I believe that one of the topics of our events here on in Casa Italia is identity. So
Yeah.
writing and reading is much about writing and discovering identity. And in this case, it would be the Italian American identity. I grew up on the south side of Chicago.
Oh,
I still remember my address there, 7006 South Honorary Street.
oh,
Went to
okay.
Raster School. If anybody is familiar, just raise your hand. And there was a specific identity there. In absolute, there is no Italian American identity. And we were questioning ourselves, amazed at how you sold 600 copies because the Roseland American identity is a specific one. If you were asked, CJ, if there is like an average Italian American from Roseland, my question is, how would you describe him or her?
Someone who grew up in an Italian family, closely related to their church, their parish, and who had a family. Like my family didn't do big Italian dinners all the time. Wasn't, oh, we got to make this and the Feast of the Seven Fishes and all that. But every Sunday we had family dinner. You know, one of the things with the family dinner on Sunday is if you didn't show up, you missed everybody else talking about you. You know, because that's how it was. That was one of the big things. So the Italians, Americans that I talk to now, their big thing is, oh yeah, we always used to get together. The families used to get together. And I remember the kids that went to St. Anthony's with, because it's interesting because you only knew the Italians. The other people were the Americanos, you know, the Americans. But the thing is, when summer came, everybody played together. You all met up at the school playground and played. And then when September came, you went back to all your old Italian American friends at the school. And that was it. But that's how a typical Roseland Italian American would be. Yeah, they had family dinners. They went to the church carnival. You know, one of the things I wrote about is pizza at our bingo nights, because I used to go get, my sister would give me money to go get pizza. There was a rectangular slice and it was 50 cents a slice. So she'd get her and her girlfriends, two girlfriends, a slice of pizza, and I get money for a slice for me. And when I go down by the church, I get it. I have to wait outside. I wait by the vent where the sauce, the aroma of the pizza would come out through the vent fan. And I called it bingo pizza. 2 years later, some guy said to me, "Oh yeah, I remember that bingo pizza." And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? That's what he's talking about. The bingo pizza I wrote about, because that was a special deal. We only got it on Friday nights for bingo. But that's part of what makes the Roseland Italian American, is that we have those memories that we were going to be leaving behind anyway, because we went on to a more secular life than Italian life. But Roseland entirely as a community changed. So all of that got frozen in time for all of us. So Italian, the guy that called me yesterday is a Swedish Lithuanian Lutheran guy. And he says, yeah, oh, my Italian buddies. He's bragging about being Italian because he's not Italian, but his buddies are. But that's how Roseland Italians were.
Do
Yeah.
you think that the fact that they were more or less forced to leave by the block busting that took place in the 60s, that they have stronger feelings about the old Roseland, the church that was built in the early 60s, and by the end of the 60s, the neighborhood was falling
You know,
apart?
that's the whole thing. It's like the neighborhood is going to change. You know, probably and possibly people will graduate high school, get married, and move to the suburbs away from their parents. Because you know, we were getting to that point where you didn't necessarily want to live next door to your parents. So back in the 40s, 50s, yeah, you got the house down the block. I mean, Jeanette knows you have your whole family, or one block has got like your mother, father, aunt, uncle, grandparents, everybody's down the block. But in the 60s, it was changing and people were getting ready to move. But like you're right, Dominic, they were forced to move and leave it all behind. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to move out to the suburbs and visit Mom and Pa on the weekends. You were stuck. You didn't get to visit Mom and Pa on the weekends because they moved with you. You know, so that had a lot to do with freezing it in time. You know, our memories are so strong. And here in Pullman, it's funny, there's people who are old Pullmanites who have been here since the 70s. Yeah, that's right. They're old Pullmanites since the 70s. Get out of here. You know, my godmother and godfather lived down the street from where I live right now. And that was in the 50s. You know, so yeah, those are old Pullmanites. And there's still some that live here. And now they're dying off, you know. Little old ladies that live alone and then boom, gone.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that you're right, absolutely right. They were forced to move, and that being forced froze everything in time.
Okay.
So my next book is going to be called Roseland 365
Oh, okay, good.
because it's life in Roseland 365 days a year, you know. So Roseland 365, and it's a nostalgia piece, you know, but that's what Roseland is.
Yeah,
You
it's, well, the nostalgia and history overlap. And well, sometimes they're opposed to each other, in fact, but let's try to keep them in a position where they reinforce each other. Anyhow, let's go around the horn and ask folks if they've got some input, reaction. I always call on Luke Corsino, who is our most thoughtful person on my current screen. But I'm not telling you who's on my screen.
Okay. You challenged me on that one. Very interesting, CJ. I was thinking, I don't know if this is thoughtful or not, but when you mentioned at the beginning that Little Italies in Chicago have dissipated or declined, I wonder if in some ways they've declined because there were so many of them. They weren't all collected in one place.
Yeah.
They were spread out to 17, 18 different places. But my question would be, what when Little Italies like Rosalind sort of no longer are Little Italies anymore, what's the progression? What stays and what goes first and what goes later? I think you suggested that what stays for the longest period of time are the churches. They still remain Italian, but beyond that, what happens? What leaves? Does that make sense? Restaurants or mom and pop stores? Do you have some sense of that?
You know, the way I say it, a lot of times, like with in Roseland, we didn't actually have a Little Italy. We just had all the Italians lived over here. It was the Italian neighborhood, you know, Italian cheese, all these Italian stores, you know, and like Lois Herring mentioned that her father had a store down there, and right down the street from Italian cheese, but on the other side of the street. But that's how there were so many because everybody had the opportunity to get fresh groceries, fresh food. But when it comes to Little Italies, you know, Chicago had a very nice one, right? Taylor Street. And then the university, the old people they were passing away and their kids got it, but the kids had houses in the suburbs. So they ended up selling the property to realtors who were more than happy to buy it and build condos 6 condos on the space of what was a house and make a ton of money. And so that's what happened there. And then, well, there were more university people, so they decided to name it University Village instead of being known as Taylor Street, Little Italy.
Well, they're still struggling with what the name of that place
But
is.
it happened that lasted for about 9 or 10 years. And then they've gone back to being Little Italy. They've gone back to having the Italian Street Festival. So, which was a big thing because they had nothing. They had nothing. And people were very disappointed. Chiguri Hardware is over there. And he sold the original building because they own the building across the street. So he sold the original Chiguri Hardware building. And he was in his, he was like 63. He was the last one. He moved his hardware store across the street in a sub-level. And the building became a restaurant, Italian restaurant that begins with a V, I forgot. Very popular restaurant. But so more Italian restaurants moved in, but that's how they're going back to becoming Italian. But that was the thing why Little Lily's disappeared. In Rhode Island, my son was over there, and in Providence, they had a blighted area with a big open space and warehouse and stuff. That has become home to 30 or 28 Italian restaurants. And they turned that center space into a big plaza for dining. So, and my son, when we were in San Diego, yeah, let's go to, I'll take you over to Little Italy. They have a street, a sidewalk, farmer's market, Italian farmer's market. The thing is 6 blocks long. He's talking like it's 2 blocks long. I'm like, oh my God, this thing goes on for 6 blocks. It's great, But Chicago, unfortunately, has lost out because that's moved on out. And now, good God, there's, Italians are not moving back into Little Italy. They're not starting over. It's unfortunate. But, like the Casa Italia does a great deal to promote Italian American heritage. And you can't bypass that. Really meaningful. And then, what I want to tell you about is a fellow I know from Roseland, James Arvia, did these 3 books about Familia.
Yeah, we've been in touch with him.
Okay, Familia are photo books, and I contributed quite a few photos. And actually, I was fortunate to write the last forward for his 3rd book. But people love the book because even though we don't know the people in the book, it reminds us of when we were little kids and saw these people walking around. I don't know if that answered your question there, but I talked a lot.
Okay, well, actually, the church, who goes to the church of St. Anthony these days?
Okay, St. Anthony's has become a Hispanic parish. And some people go like, yeah, it's all, 90, 80% Hispanic, 85% Hispanic. I'm like, shut your mouth, because if it wasn't for them, that church would have been closed. Because the Italian American community, we give money to support, we're willing to give money, but we're not going to come personally to it, And so we have our pastor is Father Mark Krylowitz, Polish guy, from Our Lady of Genoa Parish, St. Catherine of Genoa, in Roseland. He's the oldest of 8 children. He was pastor of Holy Rosary Irish, was made pastor of St. Anthony's. And so when they closed Holy Rosary Irish, they had a big procession from Holy Rosary Irish over to St. Anthony's. And because they had a dedication book that they sold, all the old parishioners came back. They had enough money to take a stained glass that was saved from the 1936 fire of Holy Rosary Irish. And they actually set it in a shadow box, a light box with the light behind it. It's a stained glass window of St. Dominic. And they also brought over the altar from Holy Rosary Irish. So we picked up the Holy Rosary Irish parish, which is was mostly black. Interesting thing there, I was talking to a black fellow, when we were having coffee downstairs after Mass. And he says, yeah, it was a tough decision because we could have gone with St. Francis de Sales instead of coming to St. Anthony's. But, we decided to go to St. Anthony's. I mean, well, now we're used to St. Anthony. We've been parishioners here for 40 years. And I was like, oh my God, he's right. It's been that long, and that's because I was gone on the north side for 40 years. So they've been parishioners of St. Anthony for that long. So St. Anthony's has a really, really solid parish, but it had Mexicans before. Now it's more Mexicans. It's also got Italian Americans in it. It's got African Americans in it. So and the thing is now with the Renew Your Church that the Archdiocese is pushing, people are worried they're going to close St. Anthony's. And I said, no, we're already 8 more parishes than St. Anthony's, but they're dividing them up, and there may be more coming to St. Anthony's because no African American congregation is going to want a church full of Carrara marble. Okay? It's got 6 built-in Carrara marble altars. It's got a huge altar made out of marble. It's got 12 columns for each of the one for each of the apostles, all marble. They can't. Why bother buying it? You can't upkeep it. So I think that's the one that St. Anthony could have been a basilica. But I think that it's one of the parishes. It's the parish that's going to remain on the south side.
Okay, a few more parting comments from the participants.
Well, yeah, CJ, I just want to thank you for sharing your stories with us.
Oh.
And, you're really an example of a fellow who's brought himself up by his own bootstraps, and you've brought a lot of other people with you through your workshops, which is great. And now I understand more. I always, when I read Franois, I think, why CJ just focus on Roseland all the time? And now I can see why. Now it makes complete sense. You're an expert in your field.
Thank you. I try to be,
You are.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Somebody else, Barbara, you have a comment?
I have a question. What are the street boundaries of Roseland?
Oh, Roseland, interesting. So everybody go, oh, Roseland, 111th to 115th, whatever. No, that was a commercial area. Roseland on a map goes from 95th Street all the way to 127th.
Oh, okay.
And it goes west. Okay, so here's the deal. Pullman and Kensington are neighborhoods of Roseland. Roseland is the city of Chicago community. So part of the community are the neighborhoods. So we have Roseland, we have Pullman, we have Kensington, we have West Pullman, we have Fernwood. There's like numerous other ones. Gano. There's numerous different community or neighborhoods within Roseland. Communities, professional community of Roseland.
Is it all east of the IC?
No. Oh, no. Pullman is. Cottage Grove is the borderline. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, when I first moved here, I would say, oh yeah, Pullman's ghetto fringe. Because across the tracks at Cottage Grove is Front Street. And then it's like you definitely have to be aware of what's going on, because it's different. I've noticed that along the busier traffic routes like Michigan Avenue, 111th, 95th, tends to be a less classier group of people. And that's why they live near public transportation. But Roseland's got some great neighborhoods where people of color who moved here because they wanted a better life had the better life. Very nice, well-kept neighborhoods and all. And I just went through a whole bout this week with people on Facebook saying, oh, Roseland's gone, Roseland's a waste. I'm like, no, it's not. You haven't been here in 50 years, so you can stop talking now, because that's a fact. It's like, there's pockets in every neighborhood that's good and people work to keep it up. And that's the truth with Roseland, so it's like, you can't disparage any one place and say that that's how it totally is. And that's one of the things with Roseland. And people who have been here will say the same thing as anybody else that says something knocks the whole community. Because no, the community is people that want to do good and want it to be good. So, and we have people that live where they lived when I was born in 46. They still live in the same damn house. And it's in Roseland. And there's blacks living on either side of them or Mexicans. It's like it doesn't matter anymore in Roseland. You want respect. You want respect and care, and that's what everybody wants.
I'll see.
That's how
I see
Roseland is.
Gloria Nardini out there. Gloria, you want to say a word or two?
What do I do? On,
Just talk. You have to unmute.
Say
Okay.
something.
there, I unmuted. No, I have another comment that doesn't pertain particularly to what you said, but it sort of does. As we get older, we become much more interested in things from years ago than when we were younger. And my father, Dominic knows this, my father, Gus Lazzarini, who was born in, I think, 1911, always used to say that he had translated for Italo Balbo. When Balbo came here in
Ah,
1933 for the,
right.
what was it, Dom, in
Air Force.
1933?
For the Century of Progress. July
Right, the Century of
15th,
Progress. Now I've lost.
1933.
And nobody believed him. And then he went and he found the picture. He must have been 20 or so, where you actually see this man there with Balbo and all dressed in those white uniforms that they wore. And Balbo was killed by Mussolini, wasn't he, Don? That's what they thought.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
friendly fire.
Yeah, friendly fire, right. So at any rate, my dad used to make things up. And my mother never believed him. Well, by God, he went down there and he found this photograph. And so now I have framed it and I have it hanging on my wall.
Oh, very nice.
And he wore a black shirt too.
And he wore a black shirt. And in that picture, you see very few women. They're in the background.
There's no women.
Of course.
There were no women at that time. What's the matter with you?
Okay, anybody else have a final comment? The hearing group?
I got a
Lois?
question.
No, it was good. It was a very good presentation. Thank you very much. Roseland was a great place. I was one of those that left when we left in 1956. We moved to Dalton.
Wow. Oh, golf.
But my mother kept us at St. Anthony's until all four of us graduated. So we were all there. My wedding was there. My brother's funeral was at.
What year was your wedding?
1974.
Oh, mine was 72.
Yeah. So, it's just a strong community. And I think St. Anthony's is the major point for it to be held together like that. There were so many people. And I didn't keep in touch with a lot of my 8th grade friends or grammar school because I went to Thornridge and no one else went that way. They were all at Fenger or Mother Seton. My mom had 4 kids. She couldn't afford to send me to Catholic school after 8th grade, so.
Where do you live now?
Now we just moved back to the city. We were in Moline and we're about 2 blocks from when I talked to you many years ago about my mom. We're at Southport and Belmont.
Oh, we were talking about Chico de Benedetto. Yeah. Our American Legion post was right up there at Wrightwood and Wayne Street.
Okay.
Right up by you.
Yep.
So, do you know Sonia Carley?
I know a Linda Carley.
Okay, that's
okay. Well, one last a parting shot. Anybody have a pressing comment they want to get in before we ask CJ to sum up?
I got one quick question.
Sure.
CJ, I know that you and I are both Vietnam vets, and I'm sure there are quite a few in Roseland. Have you done any work with them?
Yeah, the fellow who was handling the Memorial Day services for Veterans Day and Memorial Day abdicated the duties, and all of a sudden it fell to me. So I ended up, with COVID came about, so I ended up doing an online Memorial Day service and then a Memorial Day or a Veterans Day service also online. But that put me in touch with a lot of veterans in Pullman. And Actually, there aren't that many Vietnam veterans in Pullman because they live in the suburbs. But their families are here.
Mhm.
So I've got to talk to those veterans.
Okay, sum up your presentation. We thank you very much. And what would you want us all to take away from this conversation?
So my whole point is that keeping the Italian American heritage alive is a job that anyone can do. And every time you tell a story about how you grew up, where you grew up, the parish you grew up in, your classmates, you're actually promulgating the Italian American heritage. So keep up the good work. The
Okay,
summation-
well, thank you very much, CJ. And